Similar to last year, I'll do a short slideshow and then jump into questions you may have. So what I'm hoping to cover in the slides that you've got copies of in front of you, just walk through the overview of the budget, give you an idea of what our big main budgets are and a couple of the smaller budgets that we do have. Pause for questions out of that material, then roll into discussing staffing and vacancies, which is a significant issue for us as other departments as well. Discuss projects and goals on the horizon for this year, and then close it out with questions that you may have and follow-up that you may have. So that is the plan. So we have two main core budgets. We have 244, which is probation, 243, which used to be juvenile hall, but essentially now is the Youth Opportunity Center and detention services. So that's kind of the largest portion of our budget and how those are divided. You can see our total expenditures for this coming year, expected revenues, and the net county cost based on those numbers. The 244 budget, this covers the bulk of support services, adult services, and juvenile probation services. And you can see the breakdown here between salaries, benefits, intra-fund transfers, services, supplies, fixed assets, and then other charges. Included in this is pretrial services, which is a part of adult. That's a significant program that we're doing with the courts. We have both revenue and expenditures for that. And as you can see here, the vast majority of our expenditures are staff. It's our people to do the work. You see very similar kind of breakdown in the reentry, the 243 budget. It covers detention and the Youth Opportunity Center, as I stated. Same type of breakdown as in the 244 budget, and so you can see some comparisons. Again, the thing to highlight here is it's our people that do the work. We are very much a service-oriented to either adult offenders or juvenile offenders in our community, and so it's what we do is based upon the people that we have. Some of the other budgets that you would see attributed to probation, and these are kind of woven throughout the different things that we do. Our 823 budget, this is DJJ realignment. We're still getting basically a county minimum each year to cover any costs that we would have associated with youth that are, instead of going to state institutions, now we hold them and house them. Up to this point, we've not had any. That may change this coming fiscal year. And by the way, just so you're familiar with the term, Secure Youth Track Facility, SYTF. Essentially, that is the institution or program that institutions are running to house those particular youth. So if you hear SYTF, Secure Track, that's what that's related to.
Lonnie, can I ask a quick question on 823? Does that sunset?
823?
As far as you know?
No.
Okay.
Not without significant structural changes at the state level again. They made the decision to essentially take that division of CDCR away. It's gone. And so without reconstituting it in some other form, we're going to bear the workload of that. What the state does with the funding related to that is, I would say, is a somewhat, at least, unrelated question. But that's where we're at. SB 163, this is wraparound for juveniles. This is based upon an MOU that we have with DHHS for participation, youth and families participation in wraparound. 163 is essentially money that we draw down and then in some sense give back for the services that DHHS is providing through wraparound. JJCPA or AB 1913, This is juvenile-related revenue based on the Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act. This is primarily supporting juvenile programs in the Youth Opportunity Center and some supervision services as well right now. YOBAG, YOBG, Youthful Offender Block Grant is what that stands for. That's also being spent for juvenile programs, some pieces for supervision. Those two, JJCPA and YOBAG, those are essentially guided by an annual plan that we have to create through the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council and submit to the state. That's consolidated. It used to be two separate things, but for all practical purposes, both of those are being handled together as part of one entity. SB 933, this is revenue that offsets staff doing visits for youth in placement. We are considering our youth that are in detention out of county, essentially for our purposes, also in placement. And so we're conducting regular visits where we have an officer go down and visit those kids in custody. We have a small amount of youth that are in placement as well. Most of those typically end up in placement here in county, and so expenses aren't that significant. But that line is typically used for those out-of-county travels when we're doing our rounds and visiting our kids. Prop 64, at this point, this is really, well, and it always has been to some degree, a grant that's a pass-through for probation. We'll draw down a small amount of money in indirect costs, but at this juncture, based on where we're at, the bulk of that is going to the County Office of Ed to stand up programs associated with Prop 64. So those are some of the other budgets and revenues that you would see on our books. Continuing in that vein, we have revenues and then allocations that are dispersed out of our funds associated with AB 109. That's governed by the CCP plan every year and comes before you for approval. A good chunk of that's passed through. Probation gets our own allocation, and that's what you'll see budgeted for expenses in our budget. That's this, CalEMA, you see that later on. Those are all governed by state formulas. Right now, the 109 formula isn't, I don't believe we're at a point where that's going to change in the next year or two. CalEMA is a different story. And so those revenues that are coming from the state are always subject to what those formulas are doing. For the most part, because of our size, we're usually getting state minimums for those. AB 109, there's not necessarily a minimum, and so that fluctuates a little bit every year. MPG, that's the Mobile Probation Grant. That's from BSCC. We were awarded that, we're at 2 years ago now. That grant life extends to 2027, and we had a heck of a time finding a vehicle for that. It's actually in, the vehicle's been purchased. It's at the upfitter's place up in Washington State, and we should take delivery of that in February of this year. I can talk a little bit more about MPG later on as well if you've got questions. CalEMA, this is SB 678 was the Senate bill that set this up. This is also revenue that comes in. This is one of the ones that we've had state minimums since it was instituted in 2009. This one, the formula is in flux at the moment. It's not going to have great effect on us, but it is of great concern across the state for different departments and has the potential to impact their services pretty significantly. Usually this is used for felony probationers and providing services. And so it spans all sorts of things from salary and benefits to case management system support and direct services that we're giving as well. SB 129 is the pretrial revenue that we're getting based on our agreement with the courts. Biggest news in that is after some funny money dances at the state level, what shakes out is the 129 funds are taking a $5 million cut, which will be determined on how that's all dispersed by the Judicial Council. So the money goes to the Judicial Council from the state, and then it's dispersed out to the counties. We had to have some pretty intense conversations with the court a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to keep the funding in place that we need to be able to operate one person doing this program, with some support from legal clerks and probation officers as well when needed. But it's possible that that funding will be cut, and we'll have to have conversations with the courts again about what level of services that we can actually give. Our hope, because we've been running pretrial for a long time, is that we'll be able to keep at least a base level and information going to the judges and the courts, but might have to cut some supervision side of pretrial. 1869, this is revenue that we're receiving as a backfill when the state cut fines and fees for persons on supervision. So essentially there are no, for the most part, we don't charge any fees. The county does not. The state and the court still impose minimum fines. Most of the time what I see is those waived. And so for the most part, there is no revenue through fines and fees any longer. This is money to backfill that loss. Some impacts on the budgets and what we've seen so far. Vacancies is usually the biggest impact on our budget year to year. We have to plan for full staff, and when we have vacant positions, which we have had fairly significantly, that leaves unspent funds across the board for us. And so you see that in our budget on a regular basis. I've got more information coming here shortly to discuss vacancies and staffing as well. Detention, usually we're planning for averages, but we have to work with actuals, whether that's less or more. Looking at some of our numbers, we were about where we figured with 2 to 3 average daily population up to fall, end of year, last calendar year. This spring, we've seen a pretty significant uptick in our kids in custody, and that's going to bear out in what we need to spend for custody contracts as well. Our averages are, the idea is that those actually cover those upswings and downswings. That's still to be seen with this year, and one of the things I'm hearing from the other chiefs around the state is that costs for detention are going up as well. And so that's going to have a factor in our conversations with Humboldt. Here, most directly, Shasta to come pretty quickly. We're also looking at contracts with El Dorado, and based on one particular case, perhaps another contract with Sonoma again. And state controls. Impacts on budget. This is changing mandates that affects the services that we're required to provide, training requirements that are attached to sometimes those mandates or sometimes other factors or other events. And the changing state budget always impacts our revenues as well, to one degree or another. So based on that, knowing I'm going to tackle vacancies and staffing next, questions on any of that?
So the cost for detention's going up. I remember when we closed DJJ and, it was average $2,000 per kid when it was fully staffed, but as you slowly saw the decline, it ended up going up to $200,000 per kid because you're still running the facility with less kids involved.
Right.
What are some of the reasons why the costs of detention are going up? What are some of the forecasted reasons?
I think one of the things that has kind of been in place in the past, at least in the North State, and I can speak to it directly with our contract with Curry County back in the day. Typically, we wouldn't actually expect, and other counties have not expected, contracting counties to bear the full cost of what housing those youth is. It was always looked at as we're running our facility for our population, having another kid in a bed, eating meals, yeah, we could break it down and say it's, $1,200 a bed day, actual cost. But at the end of the day, it's not a whole lot of skin off our nose. It's the cost of meals. They're rolled in with school and programs and everything else that our kids and our staff are already doing. It's not a big deal. And so we approached our contract with Curry County that way for a long time. I would say really till the very end. We were looking to be good partners. That sentiment, I think, is going away as budgets get tighter, as institutions have closed. In the North State, there's 6 left. When I was appointed 11 years ago, I think we were at 11 counties out of 14 in the North State had their own detention facilities. So it's a pretty significant drop. And I think as we see a lot of times the North State was a little behind in that respect because a lot of other places throughout the state, they'd already closed institutions because they couldn't support them. So that's one aspect.
Is your budget?
You have budgets, you have less institutions, and so more demand in the North State in particular. You have that added layer of the SYTF youth. So you have counties that are able, you're now having to stand up multiple programs within your institution, figure out, are you going to put all those youth together? And when I say youth, I'm talking young adults as well, because we can house those young adults up to the age of 24 until their 25th birthday. And so what you're looking at is an age range in some counties where you can book a kid in at 12 years old and you can have a 24-year-old in your same institution. And so those that have the capacity and capability to do that are having to figure out how to staff those different sides, how to house those differently. And so there's more cost involved. And so a lot of counties are trying to figure out how to balance that out. A portion of that comes out in increasing costs.
Does your budget reflect those increasing costs, or are you just anticipating it perhaps for the following year?
Right now, it doesn't. So what we tried to do is shoot high because we weren't sure with a first full fiscal year what we'd actually be looking at for custody. And so our budget for 25-26 is actually going down. Humboldt County is currently talking with me about what that contract is going to look like. And because of some of the dynamics they have locally, that's likely to go up too. And so I might be back in front of you before the fiscal year is done to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Depending on the cases that we've got, one I mentioned already, we've had a youth in the past in Sonoma County for a specific program. We might have a similar situation, and those types of programs are not cheap. So depending on how that case goes through the court system, we might end up having to institute something like that again, which would change our cost. It's not something that we would be able to roll into our detention that we currently have in the budget because it's a specialized thing. So those are some of the factors that are going into what those costs are for detention.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions? On to the next.
So going back to the slideshow.
Yep.
This is our staffing chart, our org chart. It is mostly correct. Unfortunately, I have one DPO leaving California for the great state of Montana. And so one of those in the juvenile services branch under Emily Johnson, DPO Standridge, is actually resigning. And so she won't be with us after this Friday, unfortunately, or Thursday. So we've got one that's going out there. Otherwise, the org chart is accurate. One of the things that I wanted to highlight, there's a slight difference in what this looked like in front of you last year. We're actually one staff person down. This is prior to Ms. Standridge giving her notice. We are one shy from last year, and what you saw there. Overall, our vacancy rate's 33%, which again is a very slight amount worse than last year. And I have more information regarding that to come as well. Right now, we have 2 conditional offers out for support services, and so we hope to fill some of those positions, which we've been struggling to for a long time. So we'll see some movement there. In addition, our recruitment it's ticked up. For this current recruitment for DPOs, I think there's over 20 applicants, which I don't recall ever seeing. We'll have to see how many. Yeah, it's actually really, really good news. We'll have to see how many show up for the initial interviews and make it through testing and everything like that. But those are great numbers from what we've had in the past. And so it's possible we'll have a number of folks starting this coming year. And it'll be a slog to get through backgrounds on all of those, but that's really encouraging. Some more details on vacancies. So this breaks it down into some of the teams, the ASU, JSU teams, support services, and then reentry. Reentry is in the best spot out of any of them. We've got 5 out of the 6, and that 6th is a supervisor position that essentially we've kept unfilled right now. We've not been in a place with the vacancies that we've had to get a good grasp on whether that team could be supervised under the JSU by the same supervisor. So we're still struggling to feel that out. And I didn't want to get rid of the position and then bring it back if we got some staff on and then figured out that, yeah, that's too much for one person to carry. But you can see some of the significant vacancies there. ASU is 45% vacant. JSU, considering Ms. Standridge leaving, that's going to be a 50% vacancy, and support services is also 50% vacant. Some of the other factors that I look at is tenure, how long people have been in, and I've been telling my staff for a while, we're going into rebuilding season, trying to put a positive spin on it, but that's a lot of work as well, because when you have a couple folks that know the job well, that have a lot of experience, then you bring on the new ones, they're expected to teach and to train, and you can't hand off workload to those newbies and expect that to go without a lot of support. And so tenure is a pretty significant thing. I am stoked. Our legal clerk, I was able to change that little diagram because she hit her 1-year mark last Friday, I think it was. And so she's doing fabulously. At the end of the day, I have great staff. I mean, yes, we have significant vacancies, but we've got great people working in the department. And they show up and they do hard work every day to try and make differences in people's lives. So I'll give them a shout out while I go through that. And then significant projects and goals. Biggest one on our plate right now is a relocation of juvenile services. We're going to have to try and maintain continuity and as uninterrupted as we can juvenile probation and what we're doing with the kids that we do have on caseload, as well as try and keep the programs and caseloads on the YOC side going as consistently and without interruption as we can. This is going to be a significant project for us. I know it's in context of a larger one that we're having to tackle as a county, but for our department, it's going to have some significant impacts. It's going to demand a significant amount of time to figure out where and how we're going to make that move. And so that's something that is on our radar for this year. Maintaining services is always a struggle with few staff. Trying to figure out what doesn't get done is really the decision of the day. And there's never a time where my folks can leave work and be satisfied that they wrapped up things and closed a file and have nothing on their desk for tomorrow. It's really a matter of what they didn't get done during any given day. Some of the things that we're watching through maintaining probation services, I'm keeping an eye on Prop 36. That was a big deal in this last election. Locally, we haven't seen a huge impact, honestly. I've described this since the beginning as the district attorney, our other law enforcement partners, they get to pitch, but at the end of the day, we have to catch. And so if they make certain decisions upstream from us and those cases come down, probation is the one that's going to be managing supervision of those populations if they actually come in, if they tick up. I think last time I looked at the numbers, we only have one, but it's something that I'm keeping on the radar. Ongoing ripple effects of DJJ realignment is something that affects maintenance of services as well, trying to keep track of that. And it seems like every year there's different special interest groups that come out of the woodwork attacking probation's role in the justice system. And I'm trying as best I can to keep an eye on that and have an idea of what that would entail for us, what that would look like. I'll be honest, at the end of the day, struggling to keep that on my plate with all the other things going. MPG, that's a long-term project. Right now, minimal work. I'll throw out a little bit of our vision, though, so you understand what will happen. This is all based around essentially a mobile office. And so our goal on the adult side, adult services, is to be in North County once a month and South County once a month, to try and meet people where they're at, schedule appointments with our folks on supervision that live either up in Smith River, Fort Dick area, or down in Klamath area. We have the capability to do remote court hearings. So if they had a court hearing, they were struggling with transportation, we could actually go to them and facilitate that. We can collect drug tests if we need to. We can sit down and do case management with that vehicle. And so that's the goal of that. And
Did that grant come with funding for staff, or it's your existing staff to carry out those duties? Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Thank
We
you.
didn't incorporate any funding for staff because really it's the duties they already have. It's just an ability to facilitate them doing it on site rather than having folks come into our office. Our CMS is, although we rolled out in March, we're still trying to put some pieces together for that to develop connections with the sheriff's office and the courts, and so that's demanding ongoing work, plus throw ERP on top of that, which is the same company, Tyler, will be up to our eyeballs and case management system work for the next year, like everybody else. And then Prop 64, again, little to no budget impact on us, but it is a significant amount of money coming into the community, and our partnership with COE it sets us up really well as a community to be able to get some more programs out there for kids. So lastly, just some shifts in the budget. I know a number of you reached out. Some of the things that you'll likely be looking at is percentage shifts from line to line. I'll sum it up and we can go through it as we cover it, but a good portion of that is shifting funding from the 244 budget, probation, to the 243 budget to better align our youth opportunity center work for programs into that singular budget instead of having it separated out. So there are a number of shifts there, and a number of those lines also shifted to professional services, essentially, for the Prop 64 grant. So when you see some of those percentages pop up because of a change, a lot of that is getting rolled into a singular line so we can get it out to the COE. I know there's others, and we can cover them as you wish. So that's what I got. Questions?
Okay, thank you. So, let's start.
Before Supervisor Short kicks it off, it looks like he's ready for something. But I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate that overview. I think a lot of times we look at just the numbers and the budget and we forget about the stories behind it. So I do appreciate you providing that to us today.
Absolutely.
Supervisor Short, you want to lead us off with questions?
Yeah, thank you. Chief, appreciate you being here, and I don't know if you
heard my comment while Heidi was at the table is, I was looked at a lot of what the department asked for versus what is budgeted. And, you know, there's a lot of discrepancies there. And I think you may have explained it with the shift to reentry services versus probation, but I don't know. So I'm going to just go ahead and barrel through this if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Starting with reentry services, line 30401, support and care, and then health. There's a large jump from $10,000 to $38,500, and I just was wondering what was in store there. I know that maybe there's some projects or some upcoming things that are going on. I'm kind of curious to see what's going to go on in the different departments.
Yeah. This one is really tied to detention costs and is based on our conversations, the few conversations I did have with the Humboldt chief before we had to have budgets submitted. The biggest uptick that is likely to occur there is based on behavioral health services that are being provided to our kids in Humboldt. I won't dive too deeply down the rabbit hole now because we still have some back and forth we need to do. And she's gotten me a little bit more information just last week, but that's what we're trying to anticipate there. Honestly, I can't tell you whether that's even in the ballpark, but we were trying to keep our heads up at least and know that it's likely to come in. That line is to pay for those behavioral health services for kids in custody.
Quite a big jump, yeah. Well, thank you. The next is a couple of lines. Next page is 40620 equipment. We've got a ask from your department for $6,000, and then it's budgeted for $6,000. But then if you move down to 40628 at the bottom of that section, there's an ice machine for $6,000. So I was just wondering if that was maybe a mistaken double.
Yeah, one of those is going to go away. So when we were looking to get the ice machine, we weren't sure whether that was going to be approved by the Measure R committee or not. And so we didn't get that pulled out before.
I guess that makes sense. I never
Yeah.
thought of that. If it didn't get approved by Measure R, then you'd have to budget it somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, right on. That makes sense to me. Well, thank you for that. And that's all I have for reentry. If we move on to probation, I heard what you said about the MPG and the Cal-EMAs, and those things that you told us about may answer these questions, but I'm still kind of fuzzy on some. 20224 with 204 is I'm sorry, it sounds funny. It's office supplies, which, you know, we always say that we're not going to keep track of your pens and pencils, but your line item here is you asked for, or the department asked for $0, and we are. I'm sorry, you didn't ask for $0. You did ask for $0. In the past 3 years, we've only spent $64, but this year we're budgeting $14,850, and that seemed like a pretty weird, wild, drastic jump there.
Yeah.
Is that office supplies to go in the mobile unit?
Yeah, so
that still seems like a lot to me.
This will be computers, printers, television, camera, all the different parts and pieces that we broke down in that budget in our grant. It was a little weird. We hit the point last fiscal year where BSCC wasn't sure if they were going to roll over any funding. And so anything that wasn't spent, they couldn't tell us whether or not we would still have it come this fiscal year to spend. So we were trying to encumber all the funds that we could at the very end of last fiscal year, even though we didn't have the vehicle. So we actually went out and bought generators because we're going to have access to power while we're out there in case we don't have shore power, things like that. So we bought some of the stuff that we could, but we couldn't get it all spent. Couldn't work fast enough to get the computers purchased, things like that, which we have been waiting for until we actually have the vehicle. BSCC did approve rolling those funds over, and And so we still have access to the rest of the amount for the grant. And so essentially that is the balance of the grant to purchase all of the stuff.
Okay.
The
So we're
two
looking
office
at like a
chairs,
conversion van or a small RV or something like
It is
that.
basically, it's the biggest, I think tallest as well, Ford Transit van that you can get. And the company that we finally secured to do that is building it out as 2 workstations, some seating in there for an offender with the TV they can do court at, a bathroom in the back so we can collect tests if we need to. So we can literally drive someplace and set up an office.
That's why it's taken till February. I was thinking, geez, you just got to put a couple of lights on the center console. It's going to take till February. But no, that makes a lot more sense now.
Very painful, very painful.
Great. Okay. Just keeping with going line by line, 20229 professional services for DJJ. Last year we budgeted 10,000. So far we haven't spent any, and we're budgeting 10,000 again. And the 2 years before that there was 0 in the budgeted line item. So I was just kind of wondering what is the reason for the still hoping for the $10,000 there? What is that a grant item?
This is also based out of an annual plan that we have to submit to the state, telling them what we're going to do with that $250,000, I think it is, that we're getting for DJJ youth, DJJ Realigned Youth. The subcommittee of the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, essentially what was decided is that we'll set aside $10,000 as bridge funding, lack of a better term, in case we have one of those qualifying youth that either is not getting committed to SYTF and is being supervised in the community, which has happened before, or has been committed and now is being released on supervision after a commitment. For any programs, any needs that are there that aren't funded by something else. And so that 10 grand is carved out and has been since the plan was instituted, just as a set aside in case we need to use that funding locally for bridging some kind of program or something a youth or young adult might need that's out of that population. So that's what that 10 grand is sitting there for.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. Thank you. 20230-862 is professional services for AB 109. The last 2 years we spent $8,000 and $10,000 respectively. Why are we now at $206,000 when year to date we have spent $107,000? You requested $260,000, but a budget amount is $206,000. Why such the large requested amount, and do we know why it got reduced $55,000?
Well, can't necessarily answer that. I can tell you generally the CCP allocation plan this year was restructured. This was part of the presentation to the board when the plan came before you. Instead of handling it as we have in the past, we really broke it down into percentages based on what we'd spent over the last 3 to 5 years, or not spent, but been allocated over the last 3 to 5 years. And so each department that's being allocated funds, ourselves, the Sheriff's Office, DHHS, CCPD gets a small amount of funding out of CCP funds. I might be missing somebody, but the general gist is we reorganized how we're doing that. So year to year, when we do those preliminary budgets, that'll start out as a percentage based instead of, okay, you had this much last year, we'll roll that over. So if our allocation from the state shifts, either goes up or goes down, that percentage will give us a starting point instead of having to figure out, okay, we'll use the same as we had last year, but we have less money this year, so how do we decide who's getting cut in their allocations? So we did have a slight uptick in state revenue coming in for 109 for this fiscal year, and based on that percentage change, our allocation went up as well. And so that's general big picture. Specific to that line, I'd have to dig into it a little bit more.
How was that allocation derived? I would think that maybe it would dwindle year after year for AB 109, but that's just an assumption.
No, it doesn't actually. It shifts. It's never by a whole lot. Over the last, I want to say 2 years, it has ticked up. Back when it first started, there was, and there still is to some degree, there's growth funds attached, but there was a shift in how those were dispersed, and so rather than, and Clint can correct me if he's seeing something different, actually roll in from the state. But they shifted how they were dispersing those funds, and so it got rolled up together, and so our numbers went up. I'd have to go back and dig for the actual formula for how they're determining that. Some of it's population-based, and yeah, I could go on, but I'd be pulling
more than
stuff out of
100% uptick is for us anyway, or for probation, been pretty significant. So, Clint, do you have anything else? I mean, do you know anything off the top of your head?
No,
as far as,
not off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, I was just kind of curious why it shifted from what the department asked and what the budgeted item is there.
Refresh my memory. What line are you guys talking about exactly?
20230-862, professional services for AB 109. Department asked for 260 and the budgeted amount is 206, which, like, I guess that could be a typo too, I suppose, but with the 0 and the 6 going back and forth. I just wondered why the reduction of 55,000.
I can do some digging and get back to you.
Yeah. I mean, I might have just got your department an extra 55,000.
No, I'm voting that it's a typo because all the other numbers are exactly the same.
We'll have to check our notes. Normally speaking, the department request column is rolled over identical into the recommended for June column, unless there's discussions had at the meetings and we agree as a group it's going to be reduced. So if it's probably not a typo, and I'll have to look at my notes to get the detail of it, but if there's a $50,000 decrease, that was agreed upon between probation and the budget team.
Okay. And I see what you're saying there, Supervisor Starkey's 261,118, and then the budgeted line is 206,118. So,
well, and if you start looking a little bit down the road there too, 862 identify that funding source in the current, or calling this our legacy system, because there's a new one on board coming on. You'll see there's a decrease in the professional services by about $55,000. But I start looking down at data processing, same funding source, it was increased by $12,000. If you look down another line item down, there's other increases for AB 109 data processing. That's the $12,000 there. And there's a few others in here. UA testing went up by $10,000. So I'm wondering if there wasn't just a reallocation of funds based on the department need. Because it's 862 is not going to be cut in funding. It's a funding source. So if you start looking at some of the other detail in the budget line, you can see that some of those 862s have been increased. So I'm willing to bet, without finding my notes, that there was a discussion and reallocation of funds for their needs.
You probably just answered quite a number of questions that I have written down here.
Yeah, it looks like it was actually reallocated for their needs.
Okay. Thank you, Clint. Moving down is a Calima line, 20230-859, professional services for Calima. I realize it's budget dust, but department asked was 0 and we put in $1,000. I was just kind of wondering, I guess, is that kind of along the same line?
I think you're looking at the year to date was 0, Supervisor, and the department asked for 1,000, they got 1,000. The year it looks like they had a.
Did I mess that up?
I think you're stopped by one column. In 24-25, the final adopted budget was $1,000. During the fiscal year, the department reduced that by $200 to make $800. They spent 0. They're now asking for the same 1,000 from the year before, and that's the 1,000's matching. I guess the real question is, what's that going to be spent on? If it was 0 spent and now it's still 1,000 budgeted.
Yeah, for the last 3 years, I guess is a better question. We're not spending any money out of that.
Or what could have been? I mean, like I said, Lonnie's running pretty short staff, so his budget is prepped for full staff, full services to our community. But if the people aren't there, you don't have the cost.
Well, and those lines typically are paid or pay for psychologists for backgrounds, physicals. Our shredding contract is out of there too. So depending on usually hiring, that's where that money is being shuttled to.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. So let's see. 202-30814 professional services for AB 1913. And the department request was for $5,000 and the budget amount is $0.
I'm sorry, you lost me. The number one more time?
202-30814. That's professional services for AB 1913.
Yeah. That one was moved to the 243 budget.
That one was moved. Okay. Well, that makes sense because it doesn't look like we'd spend any money out of that line. So that was my question there. Okay.
I'll chime in, Supervisor. All numbers matter, right? All funding matters, all services matter. But just so you're aware too, when you see a project code, that's going to be a funding source outside of the general fund. So
It's going to
be outside the general fund, so the other funding sources being brought into this budget unit.
Oh, okay.
So normally, we'll go through them 100% and answer all the questions we can. But when you see a decrease, it's either probably been redirected to another line item, so we have to dig that up for you too, and let you know
Okay.
it got relocated somewhere else.
That's probably going to answer my question for this next, the next one, which is professional services for Prop 64. The next line item down, 20230-218. We went from spending year-to-date 48,000 to 546K. But then looking at that corresponding revenue line, which is 90620-218, it's 601,000. So where's the other 54,000?
That's probably our indirect. So that 54-ish will come to the probation department as indirect costs for the Prop 64. grant.
Admin fees or
Yeah.
or that kind of cost? Okay. It's just in a line that I wasn't able to find. So
While we're on that line, can I ask a question?
sure.
I know that we have contracted, for lack of a better word, with the Office of Education.
Yeah.
Did they anticipate what they're going to need? Is that why you put the 546,000 in, or you just kind of
I
best
think
guess?
That was the, so if you break down the grant year by year, I believe that was the amount for this fiscal year for expenditure for the grant. So basically, we're giving them everything but the indirect.
Okay,
That's what that
perfect.
500,000 was.
That was my question. Thank you.
Okay. The let's see, next line. I'm sorry, I was trying to process what you just said for the last line for that $500,000. 20234-857 for the data processing, the youthful offender block grant. Last year we budgeted the same amount, but we've only spent 30,000 year to date. And now we're budgeting 70,000 again. But Clint, you were saying this is program funds, so it's
I think I'm looking at the wrong line item, Supervisor. What, say that one again?
20234
Yep.
85.
So they spent
Did I say it wrong?
69,980 year to date on the most current printouts that are provided. They spent just shy of 70,000.
20. I've got 29,958.
What was
What's the date of your,
Yeah.
because the ones that are provided for the agenda does show 69,980 being spent. So something was posted
So
between,
we got a posting after.
Yeah.
This is the one that was.
and that's, you're caught in the same circle a lot of us get caught in, because you have your printout, and then we post things, try to be as
Yeah.
efficient as possible, and they do change. So that one's coming in close, 70,000 to
Sure enough,
70,000.
yeah, it wouldn't have been an issue. Well, that's because you're smart and got the up-to-date one. It's not using the old one that you marked up on paper. Thank you, Clint. Sorry about that.
No worries.
You answered the question about UA testing on 109. on 20260-857, rents and leases for the youthful offender block grant, it seemed like the department request was consistent with prior years, but the budgeted line is zero. Is that because it got moved to reentry?
That's getting moved to 243.
Okay. Next one I have is 20270-204 for minor equipment. 0270 minor equipment. MPG. It seems like we never spend anything out of this line, but we're still budgeting 4,000. We just have to because it's part of that program?
That's part of the grant. So once we get the vehicle, those funds will be expended, either purchasing equipment to go in it or for the fuel and things as we roll out the next year and a half.
So minor equipment and office supplies, they're all kind of different things. Okay.
That 4,000 just rolled over from last year to this year with the purchase of the vehicle. So probation didn't spend that in this last fiscal year, so still a project we're planning on completing.
Right on. Thank you. The next one I have is 20275-857, which is small tools for the youthful offender block grant. In past years, it seems we spent next to nothing, but we were asking for 5,000 again. But we're budgeting for zero. Is that one that got pushed to reentry as well?
Yeah, it's getting rolled over to 243, and that will pick up as we get more kids doing our Paxton Patterson program. Most of our small tool fund, that line is getting spent for materials for our building skills. So we've got kids enrolled in doing that program, so those funds will get expended.
Are you anticipating an uptick in that program? Like I say, it seems like we've
hoping so.
spent zero or pretty close to it in past years.
I think we're at 23 kids on caseload right now, which has ticked up significantly since last year.
Okay.
And staff are working pretty hard to work with families and see if we can get more kids involved as well.
And what was the name of that program again?
Paxton Patterson. So it's a building skills. You can buy different modules. And so years ago, we purchased 10 construction modules, basically. And so they can learn hand tools, framing, electrical, plumbing, sheetrock, painting, and there's more. We're actually renting a space over at the old Hambros. And Louis Nova, who used to teach at the high school, is kind of an extra help, as it were. He's running that program for us.
Oh, good deal. Are we keeping track of any of those kids? Are we able to give any stats and who's got jobs, who's doing what?
I don't know that we've had anybody get through all 10 modules yet, but we're tracking who's participating and completing either successfully or not completing those programs. So we could bring those numbers back.
That'd be interesting to see. It'd be good kudos for the group that's doing that. That's good to hear. Thank you for that. I did 202-857 for the special department expense youth opportunity block grant, but that probably got pushed to 243 as well, I'm assuming.
Correct.
AB 1913 would be the special department expense, basically the same.
Same as well.
At 42,000. Okay. 20284 tactical supplies. Department asked for 4,000, but the budgeted amount is zero.
So that one is kind of an ERP type of thing as well. We were paying for body cameras out of that line, and so we're trying to reorganize as we get on the new system, what lines they're going to, and so the money's still in the budget. That 4,000 got moved. I'd have to look and figure out what other line it got moved to.
Okay.
But trying to clean up and separate out some of those expenses so they're a little clearer in separate lines.
Gotcha. Thank you. The next one was for county vehicle fuel for MPG. That
Correct.
answered that one. funds for youth opportunity block grant. Cal EMA, you've answered those. Line 81,000, 862, it's AB 109 contingency. Seems like another line that we don't use, but we've budgeted 54 grand for it. I assume it's similar to what Clint has said now, that it's a program fund, but it's,
Yeah, so our contingency line for that, there has been talk for quite a number of years about helping fund a position that would both do some of the Medi-Cal work in the jail, but also do some transition planning for folks getting out of custody. We have a proposal, as it were, a job description almost, but we've never actually landed on a complete plan for standing up a position where they would go, who they would work for, complete details on what they'd be doing. And so that funding was set aside because honestly, we weren't sure if we'd be able to stand it up in any given year. So we set aside that contingency, I think, 2 years ago. And we've basically come back every year and what are we going to do with this? Is this something that we can pull off? Nobody ever has a great answer, and so we've got that stashed there.
okay. Thank you, Chief. Last one for me, it's under revenues, actually. 90623, AB 1869/199, criminal fees. The department ask is 68,570, and the budgeted amount is 121,320. With year-to-date at zero, it seems like this might be inflated, but it just seems like
So this is
big numbers.
Yeah, this is the backfill funding for fines and fees that the state got rid of. Not surprised at the year-to-date because they don't usually send us money until after the fiscal year is done. And this one, I believe, was a conversation between Christine and Clint on what the actual number or closer number would
Yeah,
be.
so I can jump on that one. I think we're dealing with a report that maybe wasn't the most current report you have, because in 23-24, they received 121,326. This last fiscal year, they received 121,326, and they're budgeting 121,320. So I think you're looking at a report that wasn't quite up to speed when you got it.
Okay, with
At the
with
that
that, I
moment in
give
time,
up.
it was correct. That was a
give
good
up.
question, but we got the money probably in the last week or so. And I can answer the $4,000 technical supply question. You asked kind of where that went. That got moved to into the, oh gosh, I had it right in front of me here. There's a maintenance of equipment line and subscription. So we pay, what that is since we are maintaining the video, in the cloud, we're maintaining it there. It would not be tactical supplies anymore because it's not the item itself. It's paying for the maintenance of the information. So that 4,000 is still in Lonnie's budget, different line item, and the number you're referring to has come in at what was budgeted. So we should be okay for now.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And with that, I give up.
I have a question on the vehicle for Measure R for 75,000. Has that been approved? Oh, Clint is raising his hand. I'm going to call on
You're
Clint.
never going to believe it. I made a mistake. I know it. The Measure R vehicle is staying and the other one's coming out. When we changed that around the budget discussions, somehow my delete finger didn't work. So that one vehicle will be removed. Measure R was approved as a vehicle, so
Are they getting their vehicles?
as far as I'm aware, they're going to be ordering a new vehicle this fiscal year, as long as it's available. But yeah, that's on me.
Okay.
Don't blame Lonnie for that one. Everything else is totally his fault, but this one's my fault.
We will forgive you. My only real question here, and it's just such a broad question that I don't really expect an answer to. But when we look at total expenditures for the past 4 years, we've got an average of $3.3 million. And yet the proposed budget this year is $5.6 million. So for total expenditures.
Right.
At what point do we kind of balance that out? Being like, okay, we got to sometimes work on what our average is. And because that's $2 million out of the general fund, perhaps it's not, because now I'm learning that the other funding gets intermixed in that. But it's kind of more of a philosophical question, is like, when do we look department by department and say, hey, there's potentially some money here? Now, I can see if your average expenses are 3.3 million, that we increase that 20%, to kind of put that cushion in there. But to increase it 67%, that, again, philosophical question, just an observation. I don't expect anybody to have an answer for that, but I think it's something worth noting that as we go through these budgets, to kind of look at other departments that are wanting a $20,000 system that we can't give, yet we've got this department that might have some wiggle room since it's general fund money. So you could answer if you could say anything, but it was just more of a.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, initial response at least, I'll put it that way, is, again, we're service-based. The probation department operates and spends money based on how many people we have to do the work. And I can tell you we're not getting the work done because we don't have the people. And so you'd start with salaries and benefits. I mean, that's the biggest part of our budget. And if we're going to look at reducing general fund expense, there's braided funding there. So there's some general fund expense in that salaries, benefits. There's some program funds in that salary and benefits. But you could definitely look at, okay, we're going to reduce it. That's something that we could do. It puts us in a position where we might bump into, which you could make some very logical arguments here too. You could bump into, well, we can't recruit and hire for these positions because they're not funded. And so that's a decision that we have to make, budget team, county board, ultimately, how do we want to approach that? If we've got these vacancies, which we've always struggled with, I can think of maybe a couple minutes one time where my department was fully staffed in the last 11 years. Do we just not fund some of those positions for a fiscal year or two? My concern as a department head is if I let that go, am I ever going to get it back? That's my concern. Because I can guarantee you there's plenty of work for them to do if I had them. And if I let that funding go, I know the struggle that we're in. I know that there's not enough money to go around. And for my department to do what we need to do, I need that level of funding to get that level of staffing to provide that level of service. If I cut the funding because I don't anticipate the staff, am I going to get it when I can get the people? So, more philosophical question.
No, I know. I like philosophical conversations, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I ask one more?
Yep.
Along those lines, if I could kind of tag on to Supervisor Starkey, and maybe this is a question for both of you, asking that philosophical question, in the past few years, it's been this much, and now we're budgeting for this much. Would it be more honest, accurate, maybe, to delete those project funds out of that philosophical question if you were going to evaluate the department?
So what I'm hearing you asking is, in a nutshell, you're saying, can we see like the general fund portion of his budget versus the funded portion of his budget? That's kind of what you're saying. Because like, if you look at the bottom line, there definitely is an increase in the expenses. The offsetting of revenue, it looks like it's going to be about, and this isn't, I don't throw these numbers around lightly, but around $500,000 increase to the general fund. Even though we do see a much larger increase to the expenditures. So I know it's something that Lonnie has provided or staff's provided before in the budget meetings. We'll ask, can we get these broken out? Hopefully in our new system, we can get a little cleaner version, but I think it would be possible. I think Lonnie probably has that information to some degree. Because I know Mr. Lopez asks for it every year. Like, hey, can we see what's tied to your funding sources and what's tied to the general fund? Because Lonnie's budget it's probably one of the more complex one as far as how you have integrated non-general fund and general fund we deal with. And there's a lot of funding sources out there involving probation, especially juvenile probation. And so that would probably be something the board might want to see, that it does exist, maybe polished up a little bit, but have that breakdown of non-general fund versus the general fund draw. It would probably give you a better look at, because again, you're asking pertinent questions, very, very solid questions, but, this is this grant, it's moved over here, it's like, okay, but we're still trying to get to the root of what's the cost and what's the budget for, and how much of that is like, if you're talking about any kind of reduction, obviously we wouldn't be reducing grant funding. So we don't want to talk about that as much, but if there was a shift in general fund dollars, where would they come from, what would it look like? So it's probably better answered if we get you a breakdown of the expenditures and revenues of general fund versus non-general fund. Right, and that's kind of what
That'd be
I'm
nice.
picking up.
That would help, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and just big picture, not line by any means, but the very beginning of the presentation, if you go back and look at some of those first slides, total cost, net county cost, general fund essentially, is 2.846 million for my department. And then it's broken down, the next two slides on there, you can see it broken down between the 244 budget and 243 budget. It's pulling apart those different things to give you, out of that number, what's funding what. And the way we pull that off at the end of the day is time studies. It's my staff sitting down and documenting day by day, some quarter hour by quarter hour, essentially, what work they're doing and what that can be billed to. And so in any given day, we're pulling down general fund money along with 5 other program funds to have that person do that work for that day. It depends on what category somebody's in. If they're felony probation, we bill that off to CalEMA 678. If they're a PRCS offender or a 19-9 offender, we're billing that off, whether it's officers meeting with them in the office or sitting in court, we're billing that off to 109. If it's a juvenile officer sitting down, and juvenile gets more complicated, like Clint said, because there's even more funding sources, and they're doing a very specific case management piece for that one kid, it's billed to 163 versus 1914 or a JJCPA bag, things like that. And so that's how we try and pull all of those together and be able to fund a lot of the activities we do. So it's doable to be able to try and break that down.
So, which leads me to the question that I've been asking everyone, is if there's discretionary funding, would a system that helped your officers streamline their time studies, is that something that might be helpful?
Yes, I mean, I think that's a question that you have 58 counties struggling with in California, probably plus across the nation, because I'm sure we're not the only place.
No,
that does it.
I recall when I was a probation officer in Sonoma County, I don't know if you guys all know that, but I
mean,
bring it
you-
up every
you
time.
remember time
But the
studies.
time studies is a big deal,
It's
you
a
know?
huge
So-
deal. It's a whole lot better. I mean, when I started, we were using Excel sheets, and so you pull up your monthly Excel sheet and start typing it out. We got rolled over to the electronic time card system for the county, and now the time studies are tied to your time, and so it'll pop up and say, hey, you still have 2 hours that are unallocated for the day. What did you do? And so you have to go in and do that. I know with the ERP system, our time card system's changing, and so we're not quite at that point yet. So I anticipate, I could be wrong, but I anticipate yet another change to how we're tracking it. But at the end of the day, I have to write down what I did, who I did it for, and for how long. And whatever way you slice it, that piece has to get done. And until we get Neuralink implanted in our brains and all of that weird stuff someday, I don't know that there's a way that we're going to actually like it or make it a whole lot easier.
I think that Dan should create something that we can sell to 57 other counties.
His retirement gig.
Dan, get it done before you retire.
Okay, no other questions from the board? Okay, so we will open up public comment, except I messed up the last time. So public comment will be directed directly to item B, 3 minutes or less, and then once we close public comment, Chief, I'll have you possibly respond.
Real quick. You have in services and supplies, you have an overall increase of $1.1 million in your expenses compared to the average for 2 years. It's $879,000 over year to date, 1.1 million overall with the average. So professional services is the biggest bulk. Just in probation, 677,000 over the average, 570,000 over the year-to-date, and then there's 10 other line items that have come to 123 and 127 relatively. That's in probation. Reentry has some issues also. I'm not going to go there because we're out of time. My big issue with reentry services is we closed juvenile hall to save money. We are spending, total expenses are $366,000 greater than year-to-date for the expense. You've year-to-date 1.4 million, you're budgeting 1.8 million. Your probation had $2 million year-to-date in total expenses over the year-to-date and over the average for 2 years. So I made a little note for myself. It's a grossly padded budget, and I know what you're doing because I've been a budget analyst for 50 years, so I know how to work budgets and grants. And you take all the professional services and you distribute them where you can. So that's why I look at the whole pocket instead of each individual line. I could spend all of my analysis time on probation and it wouldn't be enough.
Okay, any other public comment?
Good afternoon, Norma Williams, Chapter President, DNCEA SEIU 1021. I think the only comment that I have to make is the fact that what the chief pointed out in terms of the vacancy rate, which I guess overall you said was 33% overall for both probation and reentry. Albeit though probation may be quote unquote a small department, still when you're looking at vacancy rates anywhere from 45 to 50%, that should be alarming to you, given the fact that they do provide, as he said, services, vital services to this community. Again, that goes to your recruitment and retention problem, which is something that definitely you need to address. I know we're going to be working on trying to address that with negotiations, but in the end, it does come down to what is the biggest piece of the pie. No matter which pie chart you're looking at, no matter which department you're looking at, it's always going to be salaries and benefits. 20 applicants is wonderful for DPOs. Good luck with you. Good luck on that, seriously. And I'm sad to hear that Eric is leaving. But still, that's a large piece of your puzzle. And it's something you're going to have to get serious about, regardless of what the hell Gallagher says. The union's taking it seriously. It's about time you do the same for departments like probation and all the others. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to close public comment and bring back to you, Chief. If there's anything in there you think you might be able to address or want to address?
No.
Good. Okay. Then we are all wrapped up with you.
Thank
you very
you so much, Lonnie. Appreciate you.
Yes, thanks, Chief. Appreciate you.